Okay, so we are looking at the 2017 Transformation Geometry question, question 5. So the first thing we're going to do here is read the question before we get started. So the figure shows the logo for a garage. The logo is subject to transformations in the following order. So this is important. We need to follow these step by step. So the first thing from P to P1 is central symmetry. After that, we have an axial symmetry from P1 to P2, translation from P2 to P3, and finally then we're going to have a rotation from P3 up onto the line OL, but we'll do that towards the end. So part A of this question is to draw the given figure, and part B then is to determine the location of the transformations in that order. So P is going to go to P1, then it's going to move down to P2, over to P3, and eventually it'll be swung onto P4. So very first thing is part A, which is to draw the logo. So if I just zoom in on this logo here for a second. So we have a diameter 56 circle, which is a radius 28, and I have a radius 40 circle from the same center point. I have to measure 32, so I'm going to be measuring up 16 and down 16 to find those two there. And we'll look at how to find these two right angles in here in the middle as well. So, looking at this, it's positioned in the top left-hand corner of the question. So if I just quickly follow my transformations where it's going to go, nothing is going to go past the logo here. So I'm going to start this logo up in the top left-hand corner of the page. So I'm keeping it, there's my center point to get started in the top left-hand corner. My center point there is approximately 65 millimeters in and 75 millimeters down. Okay, so getting started here. So we have a radius 28 circle to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my set square. And I'm going to measure 28 millimeters on my set square with my compass. So take that 28, put my center point, and I'm going to swing the radius 28. And I'm just going to draw the crosshairs in the middle of that circle. So I'm going to draw a vertical line up through the center of it, and I'm going to draw a horizontal line through it as well. So 1 and 2. So as we can see in the question, we have to measure up 16 and down 16 to find these two lines here. And I have to swing a radius 40 from the edge to find that circle too. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is the 2 16ths. So from the center point here, I'm going to measure up 16. And I'm going to measure down 16. Lightly, I'm going to draw those two across. So remember, I'm drawing in color here, but that means that you are drawing with construction lines, which are 2H pencil. And I have to swing a radius 40 from the circle as well. So get my set square again, set my compass to 40, put my compass on the center, and I'm going to swing that 40 in there. So we can see the edge of the handle of the spanner now as well. Now just to label my point P, so as we can see in the question, our point P is there. So I'm going to label that. And as you can see in the question as well, there is a line from point P over to this point here, and that gives me the angle for the square that we have to draw. So that line in there. Now in the question, you are told that from that line, there is a perpendicular angle coming out of it to the line through the center point. So I'm going to get my 90-degree set square. I'm going to put my 90-degree set square along this line here, and I'm going to draw it through the center point like so. So we can use sliding set squares for this. So get your 90 degrees lined up on that yellow line. Put the other set square in against it, and slide this down until you're happy that you have that 90 degrees in there. So now I have one of those angles there. There's a few different ways to find this next part. The way I'm going to do it is I am going to bring P down at the same angle to cut the circle, and I'm going to use slide and set squares going up here then. So line up the same line with my set squares, slide it down, mark where that cuts the circle, and I'm going to use sliding set squares then again. So I'm going to line up that one, slide that over, and I'm going to bring that up there. So now I can see my logo. I just need to fill it in heavy. So all of that so far is construction lines. So we'll go back over that in now and fill it in. So heavy line there. There. I have the square on the middle of it as well. And the last two then are curves. Okay. Put my compass in the middle. This is just filling them in heavy now. And I have the radius 40 here on the outside too. Okay, so there's my logo in heavy, and I'm just going to zoom in on this now. I'm going to throw a couple of labels on it now. So I have P already. I'm just going to go back here. I'm going to go with A, B, C. I'm going to label that center point there and call it D, E, F, G, and H. So I'm going to use those labels to write the question now as I work along. Okay, so that is part A of the question done. So if we just zoom out here and look at the question again, we can see that I have drawn the given figure. Now I need to go and find P1, P2, P3, and the line from O to L. So as we can see from P, that P1 is over 80 and up 20. P2 is over 20 and down 120, so 75 plus 45 is 120. And then P3, I need to go over 60 and down 75 to find P3. So I'm going to find those now. So from P, I'm going to draw a horizontal line and I'm going to measure over 80. So horizontal over 80 and up 20. And there I have P1. Okay, to find P2, from P I need to measure over 20. And I need to measure down 75 and 45. So that's 120 in total. So 75 and 45. And that gives me P2 all the way down here. And finally P3. So P3 from P1, I need to measure over 60, down 20, so that's going to be on this line here. So level with P, if I just keep extending that one over, if I measure over another 60, that's going to give me point O. That's O. And if I go straight down from O, so straight down, I've already measured down 75 over here. So wherever I've measured down 75, bring that across. And that gives me point P3. The last thing I've left to do is draw in the line from O to L that's given in the question. So just lightly for now, I'm going to draw O to L over there. I don't know where L stops, so I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, and that's my question set up and good to go. So if I go back to the question here for a second, the first thing I have to do is see what I have to do first. So from P to P1 is central symmetry. So to do a central symmetry, I have to have a center point. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line from P to P1. I'm going to bisect the line from P to P1. So from P to P1, and we're going to bisect that, and that's going to give me my center point. Okay. So just zoom in on this up here. So from P to P1. And I use my compass to bisect that. So to bisect that, I put my compass on P, I measure more than halfway, and I swing below the line, and I swing above the line. And I keep that same distance on my compass, and I swing above and below. And that gives me these two cuts here, 1 and 2. And if I join those to each other, that gives me that point there. So I'm just going to label that Q just as my center point. So to do a central symmetry, all of these points, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, they all have to go through point Q. I'm going to put my compass on Q for every single one of them, and I'm going to swing them all around. So just starting off there with A. So I bring A through point Q. Put my compass on Q. Stretch it over to A. And swing it around to there. And just so I know what I'm doing, I'm going to label that A1. So same as P1, I'm going to keep the labels the same. So A1. Okay, next then is D. So bring D through point Q. Put my compass on Q. Stretch it over to D. And measure it over here. So that's D1. Next up is B. So I'm going to bring B through point Q. Light line the whole way through. It doesn't matter how far the line goes because it's construction. Stretch it out to B. And mark in B1. So now I'm over to F, E, G, and H. So bring in E through point Q. Put my compass on Q. Stretch it over to E. And mark in E1. So G has to come through point Q. So put my compass on Q for every single one, stretch it out to G, and mark in G1. So that's right in there beside O, just be careful with that. H has to come through point Q. So all the way over. Put my compass on Q, stretch it out to H, and mark in H1 up here. And finally, F has to come through point Q. So Q, stretch it out to F. And mark in F1. So there's all of my labels found. Bar C, sorry. So we just need to bring C through point Q. Put your compass on Q. Stretch it out to C. And mark in C1. So joining these together, it's going to be the same figure, only this time it's going to be reversed and it's going to be upside down because it's the central symmetry. But I'm going to follow the same order of lines. So P goes to A goes to D, which goes to B, which goes to C, and I have to swing the curve then. So a heavy line from P to A. A goes all the way up to B. B goes to C. And I'm going to put my compass on D and I'm going to swing the curves. So setting up my pen in the compass. So as we can see, there's a curve from C all the way around to P. And if you've done that correctly, the curve should pass through E and F, which mine does. And I also have a curve from H to G. So I put my compass on D, stretch it out to G, and swing it around to H. I have a straight line in there, and I have a straight line in there. So that is my central symmetry done. So central symmetry, everything goes through a point. And I labeled my center point Q in this case. So just to get those to stand out a little bit more, literally just going to shade a tiny bit of color on the two profiles. So my inside profile is this one here. So the spanner was facing to the right in the original image, and now it's going to be facing to the left. So 1 and 2. So that is my first transformation done, which is the central symmetry. So referring back to the question now, we need to move on from P1 to P2. And as we can see in the question, P1 to P2 is an axial symmetry. Now to do an axial symmetry, we need to have a line of symmetry. So we're going to start off by finding that line of symmetry. So, first of all, there is P1, and as we said, P2 is all the way down here. So to find a line of symmetry between those two, I need to join P1 to P2 for a start. So a line from P1 to P2. And the same as central symmetry, I need to bisect that line. Now the difference with central symmetry was I was looking for a point. So I just marked the point where these two met each other. But this time I'm actually going to mark in the whole line because I need to mirror everything around a line of symmetry. So to bisect a line, put my compass on P, stretch it more than halfway. I'm going to swing to the right hand side, swing to the left hand side, and I measure the same distance from P2. So swing and swing. And where the two of those cut each other, gives me a line of symmetry. Now, just to check if I've done that right, what I could do really quickly to check is if I put my compass on the line of symmetry and stretch it out to P1, when I swing it around, what should happen is it should hit P2. So put my compass out to P1, my compass is on the line of symmetry, swing it around, and it does, it hits P2 there. So I know I'm right before I get going. So, in the previous part of the question, we had to bring every single point through the center of symmetry, but that was for central symmetry. This time, we're doing an axial symmetry. So instead of everything going through a point, I'm going to use sliding set squares, and everything has to go through this line of symmetry, which I label now. So this is my line of symmetry. Everything has to go through this line of symmetry, perpendicular, which is 90 degrees. And I can make sure that I'm going perpendicular by using sliding set squares between P1 and P2. So I'm going to line up P1 and P2 on my set squares, slide this over, go back to orange for this, and I'm going to draw a light line through the line of symmetry from each one of these points. So constantly moving my set square over to each one, and I'm bringing them all perpendicular down through the line of symmetry. So now I've brought them all perpendicularly through the line of symmetry. And what I have to do is my compass goes on the line of symmetry for each one. So I'm starting off with C. So my compass goes on the point where C is passing through the line of symmetry. I stretch it out to C1. And I swing this onto the same line. And I'm going to label this one C2. So C2. Next one over is A. So I put my compass on the line of symmetry, stretch it out to A, swing it around, and I'm going to label A2. So you just need to be careful, and you need to make sure that every time you're marking a new point, it's on the same line as the one it came from. So A1 and A2 are on the same line. Next one over is D1. So I stretch it out to D1, bring it down. I'm going to label that one there D2. Next one over, stretch it out to B1 and label this one B2. Next one over is F. So stretch it out to F1, bring it over, and I've fallen just a little bit short here, as we can see. So I just need to extend these last couple to make sure that I know where I'm going. So I'll bring these down. Okay. So I have F2 there. Next one over is E and H are working out to be in the same line for me. So stretch it out to E first of all. And label E2. And H is directly beyond that. So keep the compass on the same point. Stretch it out to H. And swing H down onto the same line. So I have H2 there. And finally, my last one that I've left to find is G. So follow G1. Look at where G1 hits the line of symmetry. Put my compass on G1. And swing it around to find G2. And I do the same thing again. So I join up the dots the same way as I have done in the previous two parts of the question. So P goes to A, D, B, C. So P to A first, which is here. A goes to B, and B goes down to C. Now my compass goes on D, and I have to swing a curve from P all the way around to C. So my compass goes on D, swing that curve there, and my compass can stay on D, and I also have to swing a curve from H to G, so H2 to G2. And I can mark in that line there, and that line there. So that is my axial symmetry complete. So again, just going to shade in these shapes before I go any further so I know what I'm doing. So an axial symmetry is a mirror image. And to do a mirror image, we needed to have a line of symmetry, which I've labeled in here in the middle in blue. And the handle. Okay, so next up is a translation from P2 to P3. Just to zoom in on that there so we can see what I'm doing. So I have done a central from P to P1, that's finished. P1 to P2 was axial and I've done it. And next up is P2 to P3 by translation. So translation is where a transformation doesn't rotate, it doesn't flip over, it doesn't move. It is the exact same image redrawn somewhere else on the page. So to do a translation from P2 to P3, my first line is to draw a line from P2 to P3. So P2 to P3, like so. And I'm just going to zoom in on this so that we can make it a little bit clearer. Okay. So what's going to happen now from all of these points? I need to do the exact same line. So from P2 to P3, so whatever angle that line is and whatever length that line is, I have to do the exact same line from every single one of these points. And that's going to give me a collection of points up here that's going to look exactly the same as this object here. So to find the same angle of this line, the easiest way to do the same angle from each one is to do sliding set squares. So I line up P2 to P3 and I bring it down to A. I give it the exact same angle. And I keep sliding this down and I draw all of these at the exact same angle as P2 to P3. Okay. So all of those were brought through at the same angle as P2 to P3. The next thing that I need to do to make sure that they're exactly the same, now I know the angles are all the same, I need to make sure that the length of them are all the same as well. So to make sure the lengths are all the same, I measure the distance from P2 to P3, and I keep that distance on my compass, and I mark that distance from each point. So my compass goes to A, and I mark in that one, and I can label this one. It was A2, so now it's going to be A3. I bring it over to C, and I label that one, and I can label that one C3. Bring it over to D, and I can label that one. That one's going to be D3. This one here is going to be B3. Next one over is E. Now I've left E a good bit short, so I need to bring E3 up to there. So grab my compass again. I still have the distance from P2 to P3 in my compass. So G, F and H. And I've left G a little bit short there as well, so I need to fix that one. So that's H3. That's F3. And I just need to extend G out a tiny bit to hit that one there. So that's G3. Okay, so following the same path again, P goes to A goes to B, and B goes to C. P goes to A goes to B, and B goes to C. And you should notice that those two squares are heading in exactly the same direction. So this is going to be the exact same image redrawn somewhere else on the page. And this is called a translation. So my compass goes on D, stretch it out to P, swing that around like so. I also have a curve from G to H. So my compass goes on D, stretch it out to G, G to H. And there I have the spanner again, redrawn somewhere else on the page, but the orientation hasn't changed. So just giving it a shade of color again. So 1 and 2. So that is my translation done. And this previous one here was axial symmetry. Okay, so let's just look at what I've done so far. So I have my central symmetry complete, I have axial symmetry complete, and I have a translation done from P2 to P3. Okay, so my last bit now, if I just want to look at the question one more time, is I have a rotation from O, P3, until it hits the line from O to L. So reading that, if I rotate something around point O, my compass has to go on point O. I'm going to stretch my compass out to P3, and I'm going to swing it until it hits the line L. So what does that actually look like on our page? So I put my compass on O, which is here, up beside the central symmetry. I stretch it down to P3, and I swing P3 until it hits the line level with O. So, just to fill that in, I'm after swinging this curve here all the way up until it hit the line from O to L. And where it hits it, I'm going to label this one P4. Now just to zoom in on this and look at what's after happening. So if we were to look at the angle between P3, O, and P4, P3 to O is vertical, and O to P4 is horizontal. So the angle in here between those two, the angle in there, is 90 degrees, because one of them is vertical and the other one is horizontal. The other thing to notice is that when I swung from P3 up to P4, what direction was that going in? So it was going this way here. And if you were to look at a clock, we would call that anti-clockwise. So what has to happen from every single one of these points is it needs to be swung around point O. So my compass is going to go on O for each individual point. I'm going to swing each one anti-clockwise in this direction. And I need to make sure that the angle at O is always 90 degrees. So let's try that for a couple of points and see how it goes. So the first one I'm going to try and do is point A. So I put my compass on O, stretch my compass out to A, and I swing A around in an anti-clockwise direction. So we can see that curve there. So I've swung A around in an anti-clockwise direction. The next thing that I need to do is I need to make this 90-degree angle here. So what I'm going to do, what I had over here was I had an angle of 90 degrees between P3 and P4. So I drew a line from P3 to O, and I was out 90 degrees this way. This time, I'm going to draw a line from A3 to O, and I need to have a 90-degree angle going off it this way to cut the anti-clockwise curve. So I line up my 90 degrees with A to O, and I draw my 90 degrees over to cut the curve, and where that cuts it, I label that one A4. So just to clarify what's after happening, the angle between P3 and P4 was 90 degrees, and it was swung anti-clockwise. Now what I'm after doing is I've swung from O out to A3 in an anti-clockwise direction. So this one went the same direction. And the angle from A to O to A4 is 90 degrees as well. So for every single one, I'm going to rotate it from O in an anti-clockwise direction. I'm going to draw each point to O, and I'm going to measure off 90 degrees for each one. So the next one that I'm going to try and do, from O, I'm going to stretch it out to D3, and I'm swinging D3 up in an anti-clockwise direction. So like so. I'm going to draw a line from D3 to point O. I'm going to put my 90 degrees on the line from D3. I'm going to make sure the corner of my 90 degrees is touching point O. And I'm going to go off 90 degrees this way. And where that cuts the curve, I'm going to label that one D4. So my next one is B3. So I put my compass on O, stretch it out to B3, swing it in an anti-clockwise direction. I draw a line from B3 to O, line up the line from B3 to O on my set square, and I mark where it cuts the same anti-clockwise curve. So just have a look here. I have an anti-clockwise curve from B3 all the way up, and where this 90 degrees cuts it, I'm going to label that one B4. So it's the same thing over and over again. You're swinging each one anti-clockwise, and you're making a 90-degree angle for each one. So the next one I'm going to have a look at is C3. So from O out to C3. Now this is where it gets a little bit confusing because the curves are starting to get close together. So I'll just try and zoom in this a small bit. So from C3, I'm swinging an anti-clockwise curve. It's just outside the D3 curve. So I draw a line from C3 to O. I line up the line from C3 to O on my set square. I make sure the 90 degrees is touching the corner at point O, and I come out 90 degrees. Now I need to make sure that I'm on the same curve. So C3 and 90 degrees over here, that gives me C4 there. So that gives me all these inside points. So the last ones I've left to find now is E3, G3, H3 and F3. So zooming out in this a touch again. Okay, so my compass goes on O, stretch my compass out to E3, swing it around in an anti-clockwise direction, draw a line from E3 up to O, put my set square on that line, make sure the corner of my set square is touching O, and go out 90 degrees from that. And that gives me this point up here, and that one was for E, so that's going to be E4. Next up, I'm going to do F, so F3, stretch it out to F3, swing it around, drawing a line from F3 to O. Now this is where it gets a little bit complicated because all of these lines are so close together. So I'm just going to make sure that I have my set square on F3 to O. So my 90 degrees again has to be in the corner. So 90 degrees off from O, and where that cuts the curve from F, I'm going to label that F4. So I only have two left now. I have G and H left. So O out to G. It's actually on the same curve as F. So I draw a line from G to O. Again, I make sure that my set square is on the line from G to O. My 90 degrees has to be on the corner, and I come off that way. That gives me G4. And finally, the last one I've left to do is H. So from O down to H, swing it around. I draw a line from H to O. Make sure my set square is lined up from H to O, so like so. And I come off 90 degrees. It's the very, very outside curve for this last one, so that there is H4. And I'm just going to zoom in on this now to show you what it looks like. So I have all of my points again. These have all been rotated anti-clockwise, and they've been labelled on the correct curves. So following the profile again for the last time, P goes to A goes all the way over to B goes down to C. My compass goes on D, and I have to swing a curve from P all the way around to C. So my compass goes on D, stretch it out to P, swing it around, and I also have a curve from D to H. Now you'll notice there that a couple of my points are about a millimeter off, maybe two. So that's just a small bit of inaccuracy with the rotation, but you can see that the profile looks right. So finally, just going to shade in this last part here. And I have to shade in my handle as well. And that is the final solution to that question there. So we drew the figure first of all. We had a central symmetry from P to P1. an axial symmetry from P1 to P2, a translation from P2 to P3, and then we rotated, just write this in here on it for you, we rotated, so rotation anti-clockwise through point O at 90 degrees. So the rotation angle for every single point, so from A3 to A4 at point O is 90 degrees. From P3 to P4 is 90 degrees. From F3 to F4 is 90 degrees. Each one makes a 90 degree angle. So you're going to end up with 8 90 degree angles in here. So between the two G's should be 90, between the two E's should be 90, depending on which points you're doing. Okay guys, and that's it. That's our 2017 higher level transformation geometry question complete.